What's up? My name is Eric Butler. This channel is called Report and Opine. I am back. And from the New York Post, Governor Kathy Hochul, whatever her name is, Kickback Kathy as far as I'm concerned, not to be confused with Cartel Katie, the governor of Arizona, but that of course is a different story and I digress already. Kickback Kathy appoints Seth Marnin as first openly male transgender judge in history. So this already makes no sense. I believe this is actually a female pretending to be a man. And even if you go by the rules of the establishment, male should refer to sex, whereas man should refer to gender. Now, I think they're pretty much the same thing, but they, of course, the cult, will have you believe that those two things are completely separate and you can identify and gender, all this stuff. None of it makes sense, and that's the entire point, is to, of course, force you to capitulate, but also confuse you and cause chaos and make you jump through these hoops and try to decipher everything that they tell you, even though what they say today will be completely different from what they said yesterday, which will be completely different from what they say tomorrow. And that's the point, is that it's a power play, right? Do as we say when we say it. When we say jump, you say how high. We're going to force you to wear a mask, maybe 2, get the shot, maybe 3, maybe 4, maybe 5. And then a couple years later, they're going to tell you, actually, you can't wear a mask now because people are stealing all over the place. But that's the point, is create chaos and use that as a wedge to gain more power by saying, oh, we'll fix it if you just give us a little more power and a little bit more money. But that, too, is a different story. New York will have the first openly male transgender judge in the nation. It was announced on Wednesday. So this is really quite confusing, but I think they are actually referring to a biological female who is identifying as a man, but will never actually be a male, right? And to suggest anything of the sort, I guess, is considered hate speech at this particular point in time. Seth Marnin was one of 11 people named by Governor Kickback Kathy to serve on the State Court of Claims, which oversees civil cases seeking damages from the state. Quote, I have full faith that this historic and outstanding group of appointees will serve New Yorkers with fairness and impartiality, Hochul said in a statement. I mean, give me a break. Does anybody actually think that a person, a carbon-based life form, that was born a female, pretending to be a male, is going to judge anybody impartially? And I know from firsthand experience that the corruption runs all the way up the ladder in New York State, of course, all the way through the federal government. That too is a different story. But there's nobody, you can't go full Karen in New York because the corruption is so deep rooted. You can't go to another you can't make a complaint to anybody else because they're all in on the gag, right? They're all in on the scam. So for her to pretend that this delusional person that even somehow managed to become a judge is going to treat New Yorkers with fairness and impartiality is an absolute fallacy. There's no way that somebody who is subscribing and living that extreme gender ideology that wasn't even real about a decade ago is going to be fair and impartial and balanced it's beyond parody, right? We all know that this isn't just happening. In order to live this lifestyle, you have to be fully subscribed to this extreme ideology, and anybody who doesn't agree with you, of course you're going to treat differently. I mean, we saw people, I was one of them, getting arrested for protesting the lockdown only weeks before George Floyd even happened. Right? So when I was arrested in May of 2020, the world did not know the name George Floyd. But you fast forward 6 weeks, in that very same park that I was arrested in for an unlawful gathering was occupied for 3 weeks by junkies who were talking about racism in Minnesota or something. So it is very clear to me that, I mean, look at Donald Trump. The list goes on and on. But it's very obvious that they are going to throw the book at political opponents, right? Even the old homeless guy who pooped on a pride flag, right? That guy could be pooping in the Canal Street station. He could be pooping in Times Square. He could be pooping on West 4th. He could be pooping in public anywhere. And if he were to even be approached by a police officer, they would probably call it racist. But when he gets too close to a pride flag, he's now the enemy and they're going to throw the book at him. And that's just a handful of examples. It's happening nonstop. So I guess the point here is anybody who is subscribed to this extreme ideology doesn't stand a chance at treating the population of that state with fairness, right? It's very obvious they're going to go after somebody who doesn't subscribe. With diverse perspectives and extensive expertise, I'm confident that each appointee will bring honor and integrity to New York State's judiciary. Yeah, okay. Lie detector test determined that was a lie. There is no honor. There is no integrity. The entire state of New York should, and I've said this before, float off into the Atlantic, and they need to start over. The appointment of Marnin to oversee Court of Claims cases in New York City adds to the historical first in the state court system by Governor Kickback Kathy, who successfully nominated Rowan Wilson as New York's first black chief judge earlier. So that's all they're doing is pandering and trying to convince you that somebody else is racist, somebody else is a homophobe or a transphobe or all the isms in the world. And we're going to do this. And we know, and I want to highlight some comments that are directly on this article, not even on Instagram or Twitter or anything like that. In this article, people can see through it, but this is the war that we're in. Everybody knows. Even the hardest left people. Do you think the hardest left extreme radicals in New York City like Governor Kathy Hochul? Do you think they like Joe Biden? No, nobody likes these people. It's just that they somehow have managed to get into this position of power and they are wielding it nonstop, and they do not care what you think. In fact, they would rather piss you off as a show of force. It continues. After a failed effort to get the state Senate to confirm Hector LaSalle as the first Latino chief judge, a position that oversees... Okay, so here we go. First this, first that, but she's not giving up her position, right? Because as we know, you kind of get a victim card if you're a woman, but white women are still the problem. Just like with Gavin Newsom or Joe Biden, old white men are the problem, but we're the good ones. And we're going to save you from those mean, nasty other white people who want to keep you down. It's all completely fake. And I still am astonished every time I realize that there are people who cannot see through this. And I get comments on some of my videos, some of my posts on Instagram that let me know that people are still people are still duped by this somehow. They're just weird zombie bots who cannot crawl out of the trans. They cannot crawl out of the, no pun intended. They cannot crawl out of the haze that these people have put them in, after decades of brainwashing, because it is so powerful. And you kind of have to give it up to the establishment because they have been so steadfast in their thirst for power that, nothing can stop them. So I guess that's a quality that I wish more people had, right? Even if the common sense right were as steadfast about their beliefs as the completely delusional, irrational far left is, then this would be a lot, this would be a largely different situation, right? You have a bunch of people, the extremists on the left, who are willing to firebomb buildings and tear down statues and spray paint stuff and start fires. Meanwhile, the people on the right who are actually at least living in reality and not pretending that a man can magically turn into a woman just because he so thinks it, they just move further and further left because the left is so good at forcing them to capitulate and scaring people into submission. Like the example I typically use with the airheads on the whatever podcast who will blatantly tell you that they know what a woman is, but they're afraid to say it because they've been scared into submission by the cancel mob. Marnin currently works at Columbia University, and there you have it. There's a pretty viral video from the Daily Caller, I believe, who I do have a bone to pick with, but that's not what this is about, of a young man who's talking to people at Columbia, students, and they all say that a man can get pregnant, and then he walks 10 or 15 minutes, northeast towards Harlem into a black neighborhood, and they're like, what are you talking about, bro? It doesn't make any sense. So on one hand, they're going to tell you that everything is racist and that men can get pregnant, but then the black people are going to say, no, I know exactly where to get my ID. That's a reference to another Ami Horowitz video. Maybe I'm all over the place, but it's clear that typically the black community, if such a thing does exist, they're not fully bought into this radical gender ideology, but somehow the politicians are telling you that they are, and it's all tied into racism and transphobia and all this stuff. And none of it makes any sense, but they are preaching to themselves, of course, and still managing to brainwash mostly young, like college age white. It's a complete mess, but that's the point, is to cause chaos and burn anybody who doesn't agree with you at the stake. And besides all that, this carbon-based life form, who I believe is a woman parading around as a man, is teaching students at Columbia. And that's a problem. He's she, he, they, them, z's, hims, or whatever, a director of training and education for equal opportunity and affirmative action after serving as a legal advisor for nonprofits. He will need confirmation by the Senate. He. Okay, well, credit where it's due. This does look like a weird old man. So if this person were actually an old white man, he would be the problem. But because it's a woman pretending to be a man, he's a hero. That's what's happening here. His, it's ridiculous, resume also includes a stint at the Anti-Defamation League, a shakedown grievance organization, of course, as the vice president of civil rights. While no openly transgender men have ever appeared on the bench in the United States, some transgender women have, including Andy Murda, I don't know, Victoria, whatever, who cares? So yes, they have been appointing these delusional individuals all over the place to turn what is left of our world completely upside down. This backwards, bizarro clown world where everything is life and death, right? Man is woman, woman is man, wear your mask, get the shot, don't breathe the air, it's all deadly. Anybody who doesn't agree with us is a bigot and a fascist. And it is starting to collapse, I think, little by little, and perhaps Bud Light was the catalyst for this, but the pendulum might be swinging back, and they are now in their death throes. So we're going to see some of the most extreme, and I thought this 3 or 4 years ago that we had reached the peak. Clearly, we had not, and it's only getting worse. But now, as you can look at, what they're doing to President Trump, indicting him, and, Russia for 3 years, Ukraine, documents, phone calls. I mean, none of it made any sense. They threw all this spaghetti at the wall. None of it really stuck, so they just kept throwing it. And this is them lashing out for power, knowing, by the way, that they are the extreme faction, telling regular people, I was going to say us, but telling regular people that they are the extreme faction. And they know these coastal elites, Gavin Newsom out in California, what used to be Cuomo is now Fimbot Cuomo, Kickback Kathy. They know. These are old people. These aren't college kids. They know exactly what's going on. They know how manipulative this is. And that's why I can say without a doubt that this has nothing to do with incompetence. This is pure malice. And they are lashing out because they know that the people in all the flyover states that they hate so much can see clear through this as they try to, maintain that last bit of power before something else happens. And we know that voting's not real, but that too is a different story. So anyways, Kickback Kathy here is putting all the cards on the table, nominating delusional people into our court system, which is obviously going to be detrimental to rational, sane people in New York if there are any left there. And I just wanted to look at some of these comments directly on the New York Post website, pandering for votes, okay? And that's putting it nicely, right? Like, we all know that if they want the power, they're going to take the power. It has nothing to do with votes. Does anybody for one split second think that, a handful of Republicans are going to vote in New York and the tables are going to turn? Absolutely not. They're not going to let a Republican get anywhere near. It's a single party rule. They are the regime. Same thing in California, right? In California, they went as far to say that Larry Elder, a black man, is the black face of white supremacy. Meanwhile, the governor of California was, that was his recall, the second one in, I think, a couple decades, right? There was a recall back in the early 2000s, I think. So their corruption goes back a long ways. And then Cuomo was forced to step down. And before him, Spitzer stepped down. I mean, it's very clear that the corruption is deep-rooted and nobody cares. So yeah, a handful of people will still vote for them because they're completely brainwashed. But if nobody voted, that regime is taking power anyways. They're not going to let some people that they don't agree with or that don't agree with them put votes in the mailbox or in the ballot box or whatever it is, and they're going to count them up legally and evenly, and may the best man win, may the best idea win. That's not going to happen. That ship sailed. It's over. So yeah, pandering for votes, sure, but the votes don't matter to these people, not by a long shot. But my point here is with these comments is that people can see through this, right? New York Post, one of the most mainstream publications in the country, one of the oldest news outlets in the country, I believe, and people can see through it. You even go to, Instagram or Twitter of these politicians and people can see through it. You look at the comments when they don't disable them and everybody knows, but they push it harder anyways because they don't care what you think. Why do we need to appoint someone just to check off certain boxes? Why can't people be appointed based on their qualifications? Fair point. That would make sense. Democrats, rats, don't make sense. They make problems. Pandering for votes. Look at this. Look at his qualification. I can tell you how he's going to vote on almost every issue exactly. Anybody who thinks that they're going to be they, them, z's, them, is going to be impartial is completely off base. What happened to all of the normal people in this country? Where'd they all go? Correct. But if he checked off a box, that's all that counts to a Democrat. Boxes, not qualifications. They moved to Texas and Florida. And here's the one that I like the most. With every one of these misguided decisions, the government makes itself an ever more hated enemy to the people of this country. It gives credence to the accusations that it is a vile, corrupt, and decadent oligarchy. That's absolutely true. That's very well said. So people can see through this. And when you look at videos of, reporters talking to black people in Harlem that can see clear through this, but these politicians still pretending that black people are on their side and that the colored population is all for this radical gender ideology. They're completely off base, but they're going to squeeze it in anyways because they think you're stupid. And that's why a man like Joe Biden, who on one hand is an old white man that should be the problem, but somehow he's not. And he can go out there and say, if you don't know if you're going to vote for me or Donald Trump, you're not black. And they all buy it. Now, of course, I've gotten a little bit off topic. The point is, when you start to nominate these radical gender ideologues to positions of power, it's not going to bode well for anybody except for the regime. And they do not have the best interests of any regular resident of the entire state of New York in their best interest. And it's crazy to me that there are still people who can't see that. Anyhow, thank you for watching. Please like, comment, share, and of course, subscribe.